My name is Ilze, and I want to talk today about how eazyBI can be used to analyze Jira Issue Change History and how specific measures present the same data in a different way. My plan for today is start with an overview to what issue change history is and what are different ways to visualize it. Then I will look into how eazyBI transforms changelog data for better analysis. And after that, go through several examples using predefined measures and some calculations. And at the end, we'll throw also the custom field value changes into the mix. The main focus will be on how different historical measures behave when they are combined with different dimensions and times, but I won't be covering time tracking or sprints today, as those are very big topics that deserve their own dedicated sessions. Whenever I get an email saying that the report is not showing the correct data, and I see that the report is aggregating thousands of issues, it feels like I'm being asked to find a small gray cube in a ball pit. It's exciting, but it's also a lot of pressure. Large data sets can be very overwhelming. So for this presentation, my plan is to use only one issue as an example. Some reports might look a bit weird, but focusing on one issue will allow to better understand how each measure works, especially if you can go to Jira and cross-check with the issue screen and history that's shown there. So this is the issue I'm going to use for this presentation. And I see that it's a high priority bug assigned to Steve, created in March and resolved 3 days ago before I took the screenshot. If we do not import change history in eazyBI, we see basically the same information using the core dimensions and core measures as issues created. The page filters represent the current values we just saw in the Jira screen. It's a bug, high priority, assigned to Steve, and in done status. There's a filter on this one issue, but there's no time filter, so we see everything we have about this issue. And we see that it's created in March. It was opened at the end of March and April, and it's resolved in May, and it took 57 days to resolve. But we do not know what happened, how that time was spent. And to explore what happened between issue creation and resolution, and to analyze why something took long, maybe something could be improved, the issue change history is the way to go. Jira stores the changelog, and we can see it in issue screen, but it's very not easy to grasp. You have to scroll a lot to find when some changes happened. This is a very simple issue, and we can condense the changelog into the more compact list where we can see all changes in one screen at one glance, but still not easy to analyze it meaningfully. And this is the exact same changelog history, but presented differently in a diagram that I named Change History Timeline. The horizontal swim lanes represent the fields where eazyBI imports change history value changes by default, and each section of each lane represents the time issue spent with specific field value. And the vertical lines represent events. Each line has a specific color that matches the field so that we know which field was changed, when it was done, who did this, who was the transition author. And the black lines, black vertical lines, represent the core events, issue creation and resolution. This picture might look too busy for some people, but I feel that it gives a good overview of the one issue, and it also visually represents how eazyBI transforms changelog data for better analysis. When we import issue change history into eazyBI, at the database level, there is a new fact table created that stores all these transitions and the historical measures. we can visualize eazyBI data structures as multi-dimensional cubes, but I struggle to visualize in my mind cube with more than 3 dimensions, so I prefer star schemas. When we import data, there is the default issue schema that contains the core measures and core dimensions that show the current values of the issue and main events. When we import change history, there is the new table and new schema created that links to the core dimensions and also has some specific new dimensions, which are purple here. The important thing is that if you create a report and you use core dimensions such as time, project, you can use any measure from any of the schemes. You can use core measures, you can use historical measures. However, if you have a report and you choose some specific dimension that's specific to this specific schema, it will not be, the measures from the different table will not show data just because there is no link between them. So we have quite many new measures when we import historical data. There are some pre-calculated measures where there's no formula to edit. They are saved in the database. Some predefined calculated measures where you can check the formula, how they are calculated. But they are not grouped in one single subgroup, but are located together with the related content with core measures, distinct issues count. Also, there could be in a custom fields section, time tracking or sprints, which we do not cover. Quite many of the measures are actually hidden because they are most useful when used in MDAX, not as is. And those hidden measures you can find in the formula editor and just start typing transition and you will see most of them. And they are also listed in the documentation, of course. So we have some new dimensions in which I already mentioned when showing star schema. But more importantly, some of the existing when we import value change history, some of the existing dimensions start to behave differently. They gain superpower or dual nature. They work differently with core measures and with historical measures. And there are several dimensions where value change is enabled by default when we import change history. As a result, if they are used with core measures, such as issues created, they will represent the current values of the field. If they are used in report together with historical measures, they will represent the value of the field in the past at a specific point in time. Other dimensions will always show the current value. The project will be the current one. The labels will be labels as they are now, not as they were in some specific point back in time. So these are the new, there are 4 new dimensions which can be used for analysis. The main one is transition status, which contains the same members as status, but it shows status at the specific point in time. So the transition status shows historical statuses, and the status dimension still shows the current status. Transition dimension represents status change in more detail, listing from which status to which status. And transition author is quite clear who made the change. Transition author group is the group of those persons who made changes. And there is one hidden dimension, transition field, which indicates which field was changed, and it's also hidden because it needs to be used in the formulas instead of just drag and dropping. So this was an overview. Let's start with examples. Let's look at our the schema and start with the measure issues history. It is a balance type measure that shows situation at specific point in time, at the end of specific time, specific selected time period. So if we have 3 months in report, we slice this issue historical data at specific points in time and check what are the dimension values at those points in time. So at the end of the March, issue is in to-do status. At the end of the April, it has already transitioned away from the progress, so it's in review, and at the end of May or now, it is done. This is how issue history works with any dimension or dimension combination. We could look also the distribution by assignees at the end of the period, etc. Next example will focus on the status changes, where we have the largest number of predefined fields that focus specifically on status, and they are named transitions to status, transitions from status, days in transition status, etc. Work days, average days. Whenever there is a status mentioned in the measure name, the focus is on status change. And the status change is calculated as days in status are calculated as period between two status changes. And we calculate the whole days and assign them to time at the end of transition, because that's when we know the status has the issue has moved on, status has ended, we know how many days it was in the previous status. For example, if we filter only April in our report, we have in rows April, there are two transitions that end status transitions that happened in April. And so we look at the blue lines, the blue vertical lines, and we show that the transition status is in the columns. So we show that in to-do status, we show 24 days, even though the issue was created in March, and some of those days happened in March, but the transition from to-do status happened in April. So we show all the days in April, because this is how status measures work. They look at the whole chunk of the period when the status was one value. And at that point in time, it's assigned to time dimension and also to all the other dimensions. There's another dimension that displays status change in more detail, the transition. I didn't replace it as another lane there, because basically it looks for the combinations of statuses, and we can see that there's only one transition that was from in review to back to progress, and it was made by Adam. So the transition author is Adam. And this way we can analyze actually who is reopening or rejecting some issues. In a similar manner, there are measures which focus on assignees, transitions to assignee, days assigned, and work days assigned, and similar. Those look at assignee values, calculate all the time issue was assigned to specific person, and at the end, link to time dimension and all other dimension values. And then there are universal measures that are named simply transitions to, transitions from, days in transitions. And those are all the small pieces between all the lines. So we can take any combination of the dimensions and calculate how many days issue was in those specific combination of dimensions. And also they provide a way to create new measures. For example, we can count how many times the priority was set. So we write a tuple with transitions to and specify that we want to look only at the orange lines that are transition field is priority. We can also calculate how many days issue spent in high priority. Then we do not limit to only the orange line, but we specify that we want to include in the tuple the member high from priority dimension. Let's make a small experiment and compare what numbers are shown by different measures if the report structure only difference is the measure. So we will have assignee in rows, status in columns, and see what is shown by different measures. And the results look quite suspicious. They are different. Especially if we look at the first two tables. However, there are no errors. The difference can be explained by the focus of those measures. Transition status calculates how many days issue was in one status, and at the end, who was assignee. Days assigned calculate first how many days issue was assigned to one person. At the end of that transition, what was the status? And days in transition, the universal measure, looks for the combinations. This is how it looks in this chart. We have two periods of time when issue was in progress, at the end of which, in both times, the Steve was assignee. So all the days are shown for Steve. When the days assigned, we first look at the assignee. And for Anna, when Steve was assigned and Anna's days are calculated, the issue was in status in progress. So now all the progress days are shown for Anna. And when Steve, for the assignee specific measures, there's one additional stop at the time when issue was resolved so that we could calculate the days even if the assignee was not changed anymore. So Steve was assigned till the resolution, so his days are all shown for in review status. And days in transition, we find the combination and sum the days, and we see that now we can see how many days issue was in progress and assigned to Anna, and how many days for Steve. That was fun, but we have some custom fields that we want to include in this data analysis, because there were some fields that were changed, and there was severity assigned, and also issue was marked as impediment. If you have a single value custom field dimension, all you have to do is to add 2 parameters in advanced settings and import it with value changes. It will behave, it gains the same power as the previously described dimensions. Basically, we add 2 more lanes and more event lines in this picture. And there are no new measures for this, because we can use the previously described measures, the universal measures, with custom field dimension change history as well. For example, we can analyze the issues history by severity. We can see how many issues were in each severity. No need to calculate anything. Just drag severity to columns and time in rows and choose the issues history measure. We can also calculate how many times issue was flagged in a similar way as before, by stating that transition field needs to be this new flagged field, and that value where we want to count how many times issue transition to is specific impediment. Only count those transitions where issue was marked, and how many days it was, how many days it spent as an impediment. And then we can use those measures to calculate something else if we want. If our custom field is numeric field, then when we import change history, we have new measures, custom field that end with history and change. The history is the balance type measure, just as issues history, in a similar way. And it shows the field value at the end of the time period. And change is the change what happened in the period. And there are two hidden measures: custom field added and custom field removed, which basically are used to calculate the change and history. And lastly, if that custom field is a date, then there's only a new property added where you can see the previous old values of that field, and you can see the current one in a property that's just issue documentation name. One more question. Sometimes okay, the question was, what if, when we have imported the changes, what if if the dimension has the dual nature, but we do not want it to have it? We want it back to just showing the current value. For example, I know that the issue type changes are usually done because there was initial mistake, then it's corrected. I do not want to miss any transitions just because I have filtered by bug and it was some incident before or the feature. Then in that case, either you need to use issue property fields, which show the current value in the formula, or you create a new dimension that will always show current value, even with the historical measures. And that new dimension can be created quite simply. The JavaScript is very short and nice. And that's how it is done. To wrap it up, as with all eazyBI measures, it is quite important to understand and remember how each measure is linked to time dimension. And for history analysis, that date is also when the other historical dimension values are determined. And if you forget how each measure is linked to time, you can always check the documentation. And if nothing else, I hope that this diagram will has provided you a different perspective how to look on a changelog and how to approach some problems and questions. And since I managed to speak faster than I expected, I have one more slide, which is bonus track. You can create a report that shows on what dates, how many changes happened, and which fields were changed. So, no, thank you.
Okay.
Any questions?
Do we have any questions?
Or comments?
Anyone?
Recently, I did try to import data into Jira Cloud with JSON importer, which has, I think I have identified a problem. When you are importing the history of status changes, it imports from the JSON file, it imports the name of the status, that's fine, the name of the field, which is called status, the type of the field, which is Jira, because this is Jira field, but there is third kind of important field called field ID in the changelog entry. Did you encounter the problem? Because if you are importing with the JSON importer, even if you include in the field ID called status, it isn't imported. Even though this is the external system import to Jira, so it's not the everyday case scenario. But you know, when you are analyzing the history of the status changes, which field you're analyzing, the field from the JSON field or field ID from the JSON?
Yeah.
So yeah, in Jira Cloud we are using the field ID. I think in server we don't have such information. On server and DC there is only field available. But if field ID is provided, then we use field ID. Otherwise we use field.
Yeah, but because the problem was when you were doing the manual input from the JSON file, there is the field ID field in the JSON is not populated. And this is the status changes, so it might be a problematic in it for the data imported from external system. We check. Yeah, I will show you in the support bar.
Any other questions? No? Then thank you, Ilze.
Yeah.